Let me tell you something. Right now, as we sit here in the middle of August 2026, something is building in Philadelphia. Something that feels electric. Something that feels different. Something that you can almost feel in the air if you walk past the Jefferson Health Training Complex on any given morning and hear the pads popping and the coaches yelling and the crowd of fans pressed up against the fences just to get a single glimpse of what is happening inside those gates. And what is happening inside those gates is complicated. It is layered. It is full of questions. But underneath all those questions, there is something burning. Something competitive. Something hungry. Because the Philadelphia Eagles are not a team that is simply trying to survive this season. They are a team that won it all not too long ago, and then stumbled, and then picked themselves back up, and now they are standing at the edge of something brand new. A new system. A new offensive identity. A roster that looks different than it did a year ago. Key faces that are gone. New faces that are stepping into the spotlight for the very first time. And right in the center of all of it, wearing number 1, with a calm look on his face and fire behind his eyes, is Jalen Hurts. But let us not get ahead of ourselves. To understand where the Eagles are right now, you have to understand where they came from. You have to go back. Not too far. Just a couple of years. Because the story of this Eagles team in the summer of 2026 only makes sense when you see the full picture of what led to this moment. And that picture is wild. Okay. Close your eyes for a second. Imagine it is February 2025. The Caesars Superdome in New Orleans. Super Bowl 59. The Philadelphia Eagles against the Kansas City Chiefs. And if you have been following football long enough, you know that this matchup was supposed to be another story about Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs dynasty. Another coronation. Another handshake moment from the universe saying yes, Kansas City is still the team. But that is not what happened. What happened is that Jalen Hurts walked out onto that field with a group of men who believed in themselves completely, and they put together one of the most dominant Super Bowl performances in recent memory. They did not just win. They blew the Chiefs out. They embarrassed a team that had become so used to winning that losing almost did not feel possible for them anymore. And the city of Philadelphia? Pandemonium. Pure, absolute pandemonium. Eagles fans had been waiting for this moment for years. They had come close before. They had felt the heartbreak before. And now they had it. A second Lombardi trophy. A second Super Bowl championship. And for a franchise that has sometimes felt like it was always one step away, this was everything. Lane Johnson, the big right tackle who had been a part of both Super Bowl championship teams in Eagles history, had tears in his eyes. Saquon Barkley, who had rushed for over 2,000 yards that regular season to become one of the greatest single-season rushers in NFL history, was leaping around like a man who had been waiting his entire life for that exact moment. Zach Bond, who had intercepted a pass and changed the momentum of that game, raised his arms to the sky. Cooper DeJean, one of the young defensive stars of that team, was somewhere in a pile of his teammates screaming at the top of his lungs. It was a great moment. One of the great moments in Eagles franchise history. But then life moved on. Because in the NFL, even when you win it all, the world does not stop spinning. The off-season comes. And with the off-season comes change. And for the Eagles heading into 2026, the change was significant. Let us start with the biggest one. A.J. Brown. If you have followed the Eagles over the past few seasons, you know what A.J. Brown meant to this team. He was the alpha. He was the number 1 wide receiver who opposing defenses could not stop with one man and sometimes could not stop with two. He was the guy who made Jalen Hurts look like an elite passer on a consistent basis because whenever Hurts was in trouble, whenever the pocket was collapsing and the defense had him hemmed in, he could look up and find this 6'1", 230-pound freight train of a wide receiver making a play that other receivers simply cannot make. Brown was emotional. He was fiery. He was sometimes controversial. But he was also the most important offensive weapon the Eagles had, outside of Saquon Barkley. And in the spring of 2026, the Eagles traded him to the New England Patriots. Read that again. They traded A.J. Brown to the New England Patriots. When the news broke, Eagles fans did not just react. They spiraled. The message boards caught fire. Radio stations in Philadelphia were getting calls from fans who sounded like they were going through something deeply personal. Because, in a way, they were. Because A.J. Brown had become more than just a player to Eagles fans. He had become a symbol of what this team was capable of when everything was clicking. And now he was gone. Off to New England. Off to play alongside Drake May and catch passes in a different system wearing a different uniform. And Jalen Hurts was left standing there, looking at a wide receiver room that was suddenly, dramatically different. Now look, Eagles general manager Howie Roseman is not the type of person who just leaves a hole unfilled. That is not how he operates. He knew the Brown trade was going to create noise. He knew fans were going to be upset. But he also had a plan. He went to work immediately. He went into free agency and signed Hollywood Brown and Elijah Moore. He traded for Dontavian Wicks, who had been a wide receiver for the Green Bay Packers. He moved up in the 2026 NFL Draft and used a first-round pick on McKay Lemon out of USC. So the Eagles went from having one elite number one receiver in A.J. Brown to having 5 guys who are all competing to be the new face of this receiving core. Devonta Smith is still there. He is the veteran of the group. The quiet, composed, route-running master who has been one of the most underrated wide receivers in the entire NFL for years. Alongside him, you now have Hollywood Brown, who brings speed and big play ability. Elijah Moore, who is quick and shifty and has been making plays in the short and intermediate areas of the field. Dontavian Wicks, the new acquisition from Green Bay who Nick Sirianni has already compared to Keenan Allen. And McKay Lemon, the rookie first-rounder who is still learning the speed of the NFL but is talented enough that everyone knows his ceiling is enormous. No single star. But depth. Real, legitimate depth. And right there is the first major question mark hanging over this Eagles team as they head into the 2026 season. Can this group of wide receivers fill the void left by A.J. Brown? Can they give Jalen Hurts enough weapons to operate at a high level? Or is the loss of Brown going to be something that cannot truly be replaced no matter how many different bodies you throw at the problem? That question does not have an answer yet. But here is what we know so far from training camp. And training camp, by the way, has been absolutely fascinating to watch. Let us start with the man who matters most. Jalen Hurts. Because everything, and I mean everything that happens with the Philadelphia Eagles in 2026 flows through Jalen Hurts. Here is a guy who won a Super Bowl. A guy who has one of the highest winning percentages of any quarterback in NFL history over his first several starting seasons. A guy who is quiet, disciplined, almost monk-like in his preparation and his approach to the game. He does not say a lot. He does not make waves unnecessarily. He goes to work, and he performs when it matters most. But in 2025, something happened that reminded everyone that even the best teams and the best quarterbacks can have a rough stretch. The Eagles went 11-6 in the regular season. That sounds decent. But for a team that had just won the Super Bowl, it felt like a step backward. And then they got to the playoffs, and they ran into the San Francisco 49ers, who absolutely should not have beaten them if you looked at the injuries that 49ers team was playing through. But they did beat them. And the Eagles were done. One and done in the playoffs. After winning the whole thing the year before. And part of why that happened, why the season kind of unraveled toward the end, was because Lane Johnson got hurt. Johnson suffered a Liz Frank foot injury in a Week 11 game against the Detroit Lions, and he missed the rest of the season. He missed the playoff game. And without Lane Johnson at right tackle, the Eagles' offensive line became a completely different unit. A lesser unit. They went 3-5 in their final 8 games with Johnson out. 3-5. When Johnson is on the field, the Eagles are one of the most efficient offenses in football. When he is not on the field, they look average at best. That is how important Lane Johnson is. And now, here's the thing that is making this summer in Philadelphia feel particularly bittersweet. Lane Johnson, during a press conference in the first week of training camp, sat down in front of the microphones and said something that made everyone in that room go quiet. He said that this year is probably, potentially, going to be his last season in the NFL. Just let that sit for a moment. Lane Johnson. 6 Pro Bowls. 5 All-Pro selections. 2 Super Bowl championships with the Eagles. A man who was selected with the 4th overall pick in the 2013 NFL Draft and has spent every single season of his career in Philadelphia. A man who has been one of the greatest offensive linemen of his generation. He sat there and told the world that the clock is running down. And when he explained why, You could not help but feel it in your chest. Because it was not about football. It was not about his body breaking down, although the foot injury last year certainly gave him reason to think about these things. It was about family. About his parents. Getting older. About his oldest child turning 13 years old. About the realization that some things in life cannot wait, and that at some point, football has to come second. He said something that stuck with me. He said that as you get older, priorities change. Your children get older. Your parents get older. It puts things in perspective. Nick Sirianni, the Eagles head coach, responded by calling Lane Johnson the best offensive lineman in the NFL. At 36 years old. He said the team will do everything to support him. And Lane Johnson, for his part, said he still feels good. Still feels like a premier tackle. Still wants to go out there and compete at the highest level. He is not finished. He just knows that the finish line is visible now. So you have this backdrop of a legendary player preparing for what is likely his final ride. And that adds an emotional weight to this Eagles season that goes beyond wins and losses. Because every game is a potential last game for Lane Johnson. Every snap could be one of the final snaps of a Hall of Fame career. And his teammates know it. And Eagles fans know it. And it makes everything feel a little more urgent. A little more precious. Now let us talk about the new system. Because this is maybe the biggest football story happening in Philadelphia right now, and it is complicated enough that you need to really pay attention to it. Going into 2026, the Eagles hired Sean Mannion as their offensive coordinator. And this is important. Because this is now the fourth offensive coordinator that Jalen Hurts has had in 4 consecutive seasons with the Philadelphia Eagles. Think about that. 4 years. 4 different coordinators. 4 different systems. 4 different playbooks to learn, for different philosophies to adapt to, for different voices in his ear telling him where to go with the football and how to set up his feet and when to tuck it and run and when to stand in the pocket and trust his receivers. Most elite quarterbacks get years, sometimes their entire careers, to develop chemistry with one system, one coordinator, one offensive philosophy. Jalen Hurts gets a new one every single offseason. Now here is the other complicating factor on top of that. Not only is Hurts working with a new coordinator for the 4th straight season, he is also doing it without the player who was his most reliable weapon over the past few seasons. A.J. Brown is gone. The guy who could always bail Jalen out. The guy who could make a contested catch in traffic when the play broke down. Gone to New England. So when Jalen Hurts walked into that training facility at the Jefferson Health Training Complex in early August of 2026, he was walking into genuinely unknown territory. He knew it. His coaches knew it. The league knew it. And the first 2 weeks of training camp have been a journey of watching Jalen Hurts navigate that unknown territory in real time. Some days have been spectacular. There have been moments in practice where Hurts has looked absolutely electric. Multiple reporters who have been watching Eagles training camp for years have noted that Hurts looks quicker and faster than he did a year ago. His footwork, his ability to get through his progressions and find the open receiver, has looked sharp. There was one red zone period in practice where he found Devonta Smith for a pair of touchdowns before running in for another one himself, and his teammates were jumping and celebrating like it was a playoff game. And there have been other moments where the new system still looks a little rough around the edges. Where the timing is still not quite there. Where you can see the process of installation happening right in front of you. Linebacker Zach Bond, one of the best players on the Eagles defense, picked off a Hurts throw over the middle during one practice session. Hurts had found Elijah Moore on a similar concept the play before, and he went back to that same well, and Bond was there waiting for him. That is the kind of thing that happens when you are still learning. When the system is still new. And that is totally fine in August. But it is also a reminder that this Eagles offense in 2026 is not a finished product yet. It is still being built. Sean Mannion, the new offensive coordinator, has talked about wanting to create misdirection. About using the run game to open up things in the passing game. About making sure that Saquon Barkley is put in the best possible position to succeed. And the run game in training camp has looked strong. Barkley and his backup, Tank Bigsby, have been gashing the defense in run drills. Bigsby, who averaged nearly 6 yards per carry for the Eagles in 2025, has been bringing serious energy and making the case that he deserves real playing time this season. And Saquon Barkley himself has talked about how this new system under Mannion might unlock things about his game that have not been fully on display yet in his career. That is a fascinating idea, because Barkley has already been one of the most electrifying running backs in the NFL over the past several years. He rushed for over 2,000 yards in a regular season. He was a central piece of a Super Bowl championship team. What does unlocking something new about Saquon Barkley even look like? What does a version of Saquon Barkley that is even more dangerous look like? That is one of the most exciting questions of the entire 2026 NFL season. And it is happening right here, right now, in a training complex in South Philadelphia. Now let us talk about the wide receivers. Because the story in that room has been wild and complicated and full of unexpected twists. Training camp started with the understanding that Devonta Smith would be the clear number one receiver, and then the competition for the second, third, and fourth spots would sort itself out over the course of camp and preseason. Simple enough. But then the hamstring injuries started. Devonta Smith went down with a hamstring injury that kept him out of multiple practices. Makai Lemon, the first-round rookie who was supposed to be getting crucial early reps and building chemistry with Hurts, also suffered a hamstring injury and has missed time. Britton Covey, who was competing for a depth spot, also dealt with a hamstring problem. Dameon Pierce, a running back, had a hamstring issue. It felt like for a moment there, the Eagles' training facility had become a hamstring injury factory, and reporters were spending half their time trying to figure out which player was going to limp off the field next. The good news on both Smith and Lemon is that the reports suggest neither injury is serious. Nothing that is expected to keep them out long term. But when you are a rookie receiver who burned a first-round pick on, and you are missing critical training camp reps because of an injury in your first NFL summer, that is not ideal. Every day of practice that Makai Lemon misses is a day that his development is slightly delayed. Every route he does not run with Hurts is a timing pattern they have not built together yet. But out of the uncertainty in that receiver room, something interesting has emerged. His name is Darius Cooper. You might not know that name. You probably do not know that name. Darius Cooper is a second-year receiver who came from a small college program in Texas. He was not a high-profile recruit. He was not a projected starter. He came into camp as a depth player, someone who was going to need to fight just to make the 53-man roster. And he has been one of the best receivers in Eagles training camp. Multiple observers and reporters who have been watching practices have singled Cooper out as one of the standout performers of the entire camp. He has what they describe as strong hands, an ability to hold on to contested catches even through contact, a big play ability on deep balls. And Jalen Hurts himself has said that Cooper is going to continue to grow and that he has the diligence and the hunger that you want to see from a young receiver. That is a wild development. That is the kind of thing that makes training camp so unpredictable and so exciting. Because nobody wrote Darius Cooper into any storylines before camp started. Nobody was making YouTube videos about the impact Darius Cooper was going to have on the Eagles' offense in 2026. And now he is one of the most talked about players in the building. Dontavian Wicks, the trade acquisition from Green Bay, has also been impressive. He is a big receiver, physical in the way that A.J. Brown was physical, though not quite on that level. But he can win in contested catch situations. He can make plays down the field. And Saquon Barkley made headlines when he called the Wicks trade a steal. Nick Sirianni compared him to Keenan Allen, which is high praise for a receiver who most casual fans had never heard of before he showed up in Philadelphia. There was one moment in practice that really announced Wicks' arrival. Near the end of a session, Hurts unfurled a pass deep down the field. Wicks was double covered. Two defensive backs were on him. He elevated above both of them and secured the ball. Just made the kind of play you cannot teach. The kind of play that makes your teammates and coaches stop what they are doing and just nod their heads. So the receiver room, even with the injuries, has had its bright spots. Elijah Moore has been making plays in the short and intermediate areas. Hollywood Brown brings speed that stretches the field. And Devonta Smith, when healthy, is still one of the most technically precise route runners in the entire NFL. He makes his living out of fundamentals, out of running routes so clean and so precise that defensive backs who are supposed to be covering him end up playing catch-up all game long. The ceiling of this receiving core is real. You can see it in the flashes. The question is whether all of those pieces can come together into something consistent and reliable once the real games start in September. Now let us cross over to the other side of the ball. Because if there is one area of this Eagles team where there are fewer questions and more reasons to be genuinely excited, it is the defense. The Philadelphia Eagles defense in 2026 is legitimate. It is scary. It has pieces all over the field that can disrupt and dominate and make opposing offenses feel like they are being swallowed whole. Let us start with Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean in the secondary. These two young cornerbacks represent the future of the Eagles defense. And honestly, they might already be the present. Mitchell, who was an early first-round pick for the Eagles a couple of years ago, has developed into one of the better young corners in the entire NFL. He can lock down receivers man-to-man and has the athleticism to chase down anyone in the league. DeJean, who was another defensive back the Eagles brought in high in the draft, has already shown big play ability. He had an interception in Super Bowl 59. He is a ball hawk who finds the football and makes his presence felt. Then you have Zack Baun at linebacker. Baun has become one of the premier linebackers in the NFC. He is everywhere. He makes plays against the run, he gets after the quarterback, and he is smart enough to be in the right place at the right time in coverage. As we mentioned, he picked off Hurts in practice. That is the kind of awareness and instinct that makes him one of the most important defenders on this team. Joining Baun in the linebacking core is Jihaad Campbell, entering his second year in the NFL. Campbell was highly touted as a rookie, and the early reports from training camp suggest that his second-year leap could be significant. Second-year jumps for linebackers in particular tend to be enormous, because so much of what makes a linebacker great is not raw athleticism but pattern recognition. The ability to see what is happening on the other side of the ball before the snap even occurs. Campbell has the athleticism. Now he has a full year of NFL experience in his memory bank. That is a dangerous combination. And then there is Jeremiah Trotter Jr. Training camp observers have been raving about him. The young linebacker, entering his third season in the league, has been standing out in almost every practice. He is physical. He is fast. And there is a certain legacy attached to his name, because his father Jeremiah Trotter was a standout linebacker for the Eagles in an earlier era. So when you see Junior out there making plays and earning praise from coaches and teammates, there is this feeling that something special is being passed down through generations. The defensive line is led by Jalen Carter. And Jalen Carter in 2026 is something to behold. When the Eagles first selected Carter in the first round of the 2023 draft, there was a lot of conversation about his personality, about off-field concerns, about whether the enormous physical talent was going to translate into on-field dominance. And the answer has been absolutely yes. Carter has developed into one of the most disruptive interior defensive linemen in the NFL. He has the combination of size and quickness that makes him nearly impossible to move. He can collapse the pocket against the run and get after the quarterback in passing situations. And here is the kicker. The Eagles just signed Carter to a contract extension that runs all the way through 2031. That is a franchise commitment. That is the Eagles front office looking at Jalen Carter and saying we want you to be the anchor of this defense for the next several years. And Carter himself responded by playing at an absolutely elite level in practice, getting into the backfield constantly, making life difficult for everyone on the offensive side of the ball. Jordan Davis is alongside him on the interior. Davis is a massive human being, a run-stopping force who occupies blockers and creates free opportunities for the linebackers behind him. And then you have a rotation of pass rushers on the edges. Jonathan Greenard, Jalyx Hunt, Nolan Smith Jr., A.J. Epineza. Multiple guys who can get after the quarterback and make the quarterback uncomfortable. And the whole thing is coordinated by defensive coordinator Vic Fangio. Vic Fangio is one of the most respected defensive minds in the entire NFL. The man has been building defenses at the highest level for decades. He knows how to put players in position to succeed. He knows how to diagnose what opposing offenses are trying to do and take it away. Having Fangio running this defense gives the Eagles a significant edge, because whatever questions you might have about the offense and the new system and the transition away from A.J. Brown, you know that the defense is going to be prepared, disciplined, and dangerous every single week. Now let us talk about the elephant in the room. The thing that Eagles fans keep going back to when they think about the 2026 season. Last year hurt. There is no other way to say it. The 2025 season, after the high of winning the Super Bowl, felt like running full speed into a wall. The Eagles started well enough. They were a playoff team. They finished 11-6. But the injuries down the stretch, particularly to Lane Johnson, turned a potential contender into a team that was vulnerable in the postseason. And then the San Francisco 49ers, a team that was decimated by injuries themselves, came in and ended the Eagles' season in the wild card round. For a city like Philadelphia, that kind of loss does not just sting. It lingers. Philadelphia fans are passionate about their Eagles in a way that goes beyond normal sports fandom. This is a city that talks about its team year-round. A city where the Eagles are not just a football team but a part of the civic identity. And when that team falls short, especially after having won it all the year before, it creates a hunger. A desperation to get back to that level. And that hunger is present in this training camp. You can see it in the way these players are working. You can see it in the intensity of the practices. Coach Sirianni has emphasized that they are starting from scratch. That the championship from 2024 is not a shield they can carry into 2026. That the NFL moves fast, and teams that try to rest on past accomplishments get left behind in a hurry. The question is whether the Eagles have enough pieces, with all the changes they have made, to make another run at the top. And the honest answer right now is, we do not know yet. We know they have Saquon Barkley, who remains one of the most explosive players in the league. We know they have Jalen Hurts, who has already proven that he can lead a team to a Super Bowl championship. We know they have a defense that is filled with talent and led by one of the best defensive minds in the business. We know they have depth in positions where they previously had none. But they also have a brand new offensive system that is still being installed. They have a wide receiver room that has been dealing with injuries in camp. They have a future Hall of Fame right tackle who has told the world this is probably his last season. And they have a quarterback who is adapting to his fourth offensive coordinator in 4 years, without his most trusted weapon. That is a lot of variables. That is a lot of uncertainty for a team that believes it should be a Super Bowl contender. But you know what? That uncertainty is part of what makes the Eagles so fascinating to follow right now. Because this is not a finished team. This is a team in the middle of transformation. Team that is figuring out what it wants to be. And training camp is where that figuring out happens. Right there on the practice field, under the August sun, in front of the fans who pack themselves against the fences every day just to be close to the action. Let us talk about the preseason, because it is already here. Tonight, August 15th, the Eagles play their first preseason game. They are going to Baltimore to face the Ravens at M&T Bank Stadium. And look, preseason games do not count in the standings. They do not mean anything on the surface. But they are an opportunity to see some of these questions answered in real competition. You get to see how the new offense looks against a real defense. You get to see which of those young receivers can make plays when the stakes are actually in front of them. Now Saquon Barkley is not going to play, or at least he is not expected to play much. You do not put your most important offensive player in danger in a preseason game. But you might see some of the young receivers like Dontavian Wicks and Darius Cooper get real opportunities to build on what they have been doing in practice. You might see the backup quarterback Tanner McKee get significant reps. You might see the young defensive players, guys like Jeremiah Trotter Jr. and Jihad Campbell, come out and make a statement. And Markell Bell, the rookie offensive tackle who Lane Johnson himself has endorsed as his potential successor at right tackle, is going to get a chance to show what he can do. Lane Johnson actually went out of his way to speak positively about Bell. He is helping groom the man who might eventually replace him. That kind of veteran leadership is everything. That is what separates great locker rooms from average ones. Let me paint you a picture of what a typical morning at Eagles training camp looks like right now, because I want you to feel it. It is early. The sun is not fully up yet. But the lights inside the Jefferson Health Training Complex are blazing. Players are arriving, some of them in big trucks, some of them in luxury sedans, some of them walking in from the parking lot with headphones on and eyes focused. The fans who line up along the outside barriers have been there since before sunrise in some cases. They have jerseys on. They have signs. They have children on their shoulders pointing at players who walk by and whisper their names like they cannot quite believe these giants are real. Inside, the training staff is already working. Trainers are moving through the locker room, checking on players who need treatment, going over protocols. The coaching staff is reviewing film from the day before, pointing at screens and having quiet, intense conversations about what they need to correct and what they need to reinforce. And then the players come out onto the field. You hear it before you see it. The cleats on turf. The sound of footballs being thrown and caught. That sharp pop when a receiver's hands close around the ball just right. The coaches calling out instructions. The whistle. Jalen Hurts is out early. He is always out early. He throws warm-up passes with a quiet, methodical focus, like someone who has been doing this his entire life, which of course he has. His mechanics are precise. His footwork is crisp. The reporters who have covered him for years say he looks quicker, faster, like something has been dialed up in the off-season. Like he came back from the 2025 disappointment with something to prove. And across the field, in individual drills, you see the receivers running routes. Dontavian Wicks, the big physical wideout, running a crisp-out route and snatching the ball out of the air. Elijah Moore doing his thing on short, quick routes, making defensive backs miss in small spaces. Young Darius Cooper running a deep route and coming down with a catch that makes the defensive back following him look back with something that is almost like respect. And then the defense gets its turn. Zach Bond dropping into coverage, reading the quarterback's eyes, breaking on the ball. Jalen Carter lining up against the interior of the offensive line and getting into the backfield so fast it almost does not seem fair. Quinyon Mitchell shadowing a receiver on the boundary, physical, competitive, his hands jamming at the top of the route before the receiver can get into his stem. This is what August looks like. This is what the beginning of something looks like. Before the standings matter. Before the wins and losses pile up. When everything is still possible and every player is still undefeated. And for the Eagles, there is a sense that they need to make this year count. Not just because of the business of football and wanting to win, but because of Lane Johnson. Because the man who has been the anchor of this offensive line for 13 seasons has told them this is probably his last ride. Because every practice he is out there, every time he lines up across from a pass rusher and holds his ground, might be one of the last times he ever does it. And Lane Johnson himself seems to have made peace with that. He has been transparent with his teammates about where his head is at. He says he feels at ease talking about it. He says he still feels like a premier tackle. He says his focus is completely on the Eagles and on this season. He wants to win. He wants to go out on top if he can. He wants to give this city and this team everything he has left. Nick Sirianni said Lane Johnson is the best offensive lineman in the NFL. At 36 years old. In his 14th season. Playing through the knowledge that this is probably his last year. That is remarkable. That is the kind of thing that makes sports special. That is the kind of thing that makes you want to watch every single game, because you know the clock is ticking. Now let us zoom out for a moment and think about the bigger picture. Think about what the Eagles need this season to actually be a Super Bowl contender again. First, Jalen Hurts needs to thrive in this new offensive system. He has done it before. Every time a new coordinator has come in, Hurts has found a way to absorb the playbook and perform. But the A.J. Brown factor is real. Brown was a true difference maker. Someone who could make up for a bad play design or a broken play just by being physically superior to the guy covering him. Without Brown, Hurts needs the wide receiver room around him to collectively be better than the sum of their parts. He needs Dontavian Wicks or Darius Cooper or Makai Lemon to step into some version of that role. Maybe not all of it. Maybe nobody can replicate exactly what Brown brought. But someone needs to make plays when the defense takes away Devonta Smith and doubles Saquon Barkley. Second, the defense needs to perform at an elite level. And honestly, looking at the roster, there is every reason to believe it can. When Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean are both healthy and playing at their best, that is a cornerback tandem that can compete with any receiving corps in the NFL. When Jalen Carter is dominant up front, it makes everything easier for the linebackers behind him. When Vic Fangio is drawing up game plans, the scheme is going to be sound. The defense could legitimately be one of the best in football in 2026. Third, Saquon Barkley needs to be Saquon Barkley. And there is no indication that anything about that has changed. He looks healthy. He looks hungry. He talks about how this new offensive system can unlock things in his game that have not been fully displayed yet. If Sean Mannion's scheme puts Barkley in positions where he can do what he does naturally, where he can hit the edge and make something out of nothing, where he can catch the ball out of the backfield and make defenders miss in open space, then the Eagles' offense can be functional and dangerous even without A.J. Brown. Fourth, the offensive line needs to hold up. And that comes back to Lane Johnson. Because when Johnson is healthy and playing at his best, this offensive line is elite. He is the anchor. He is what makes the whole thing work. If he can stay on the field for 16, 17 games this season, the way he has in most of his career, the offense has a foundation to build from. If he gets hurt again the way he did last year, it becomes a very different kind of season. And then there is the wild card element that every Eagles fan is quietly keeping in their head. The possibility that out of this group of new receivers, someone unexpected emerges as a real star. A Darius Cooper breakout. A Dontavian Wicks becoming a genuine number 2 receiver. A Makai Lemon developing faster than anyone expected and becoming the next big thing in Philadelphia. Those kinds of stories happen in football. They happen all the time. A player comes from nowhere and becomes essential. A player that nobody was talking about in August becomes the story of the season by December. Could that happen for the Eagles in 2026? Could one of these young receivers rise up and make you forget about A.J. Brown? Maybe not forget. You do not forget A.J. Brown. But maybe fill the space he left in a way that makes this team whole again? We will see. That is the beauty of it. We genuinely do not know yet. What we do know is this. The Philadelphia Eagles are a team with serious talent. A Super Bowl winning quarterback. One of the best running backs in the sport. An improving and deep wide receiver core. A tight end in Dallas Goedert who has been excellent. A defense with young stars and veteran leadership. A legendary offensive lineman playing his final season with everything to prove. And a new offensive system that, when it clicks, when all the pieces understand their roles and the timing is right and the misdirection is working and Barkley is hitting holes that seem to open up like magic, could be as dangerous as anything in the NFC. There are questions. Real ones. Legitimate ones. But there is also talent. Real, legitimate, championship-level talent. Training camp is where you build things. Where you lay the foundation. Where the questions start to get answered, slowly, one practice at a time, one rep at a time, one day at a time. And every morning when those Eagles players come out onto that field at the Jefferson Health Training Complex, they are building something. They are stacking bricks. Tonight they play Baltimore in a preseason game and the first real glimpse happens. In September the regular season begins, and the real answers start coming. And for Lane Johnson, every game from here on out carries a weight that goes beyond football. Because he said himself that he wants to soak it all in. That he is aware of how precious this time is. That when it is over, it is over. And for the Eagles fan base, for a city that loves this team the way Philadelphia loves its Eagles, watching Lane Johnson play his final season while surrounded by teammates chasing another championship is a story worth following every single day. The Eagles are not satisfied with what they accomplished in 2024. They do not talk about it. Nick Sirianni does not bring up the Lombardi Trophy. The players are not coasting. They are working. They are grinding. They are trying to build something that will carry them back to the top. Jalen Hurts is quicker and faster, the reporters say. Saquon Barkley believes this new system will unlock things we have never seen from him. Jalen Carter just signed a contract extension through 2031 and is dominating in practice. Darius Cooper, a name nobody knew 3 weeks ago, is making NFL receivers look at him with genuine respect. And Lane Johnson, the great Lane Johnson, is out there on that practice field every day, doing what he has done for 14 years, protecting his quarterback and setting the tone and reminding everyone around him what it looks like to be a professional. This Eagles team is not finished writing its story. Not even close. Things are heating up in Philadelphia. And the best part of it? The season has not even started yet.